So let's continue down the list of terrible ICO practices, 6 through 10. And the first one is the fork offering, right? And I've talked about this before, these initial fork offerings. We have enough Bitcoin, right? It doesn't work when the dust is all settled and cryptocurrency is mainstream. Bitcoin is probably not to be the remnant thereof. It's built on script. If you see somebody who is contemplating, some type of fork offering, ask them what Turing complete means. And when they don't know, that should probably tell you why the fork offering is a terrible idea. But it tends to be sort of like the Denzian of scammers and Ponzi schemes and the like. So the fork offering, stay away from them. Second thing, and this draws on my experience in the penny stock world, but the over-reliance on message boards like Bitcoin Talk. It's completely biased. It's completely partial. It's completely motivated by things like bounty programs, signature programs, and all this nonsense, right? And the reality is there's no transparency. You don't know who's saying what from their mother's basement or whatever the case may be. And if you look at the penny stock world with complete shitholes like Investors Hub and things like that, it's really just a manipulation room, right? It's just it's these forums that are created to manipulate the prices of securities, and you see a lot of that, especially like in the announcement threads and the bounty threads. So none of it is reliable, but people rely on it, and they want to rely on it for these ICOs, and they want to make that sort of like a core element of their marketing for it, and it couldn't be more false, it couldn't be more spammy, it couldn't be more untrue. And third, the ICOs that don't really need blockchain, right? And this goes out to Kim.com because his ICO, it doesn't need blockchain. Like all these app coins, which just sort of try to rehash ideas that are already there and want to introduce a new cryptocurrency through an ICO, it doesn't make any sense, right? I still go back to the test where if you had a debit card and you had to spend $1 and you had Bitcoin and you were going to spend $1 in Bitcoin, in what scenario, right, would it make sense to actually use the Bitcoin over the dollar? Next to none, right? Next to none outside of some vague anonymity thing. So in the ICO world, even with an Ethereum-based token, what's the advantage, right? If this has been done before and this is not a unique model, and I get that marketing plays in on how these things are successful, but why do you need to actually have an ICO in order to make it successful, right? Why do you need to create your own cryptocurrency to make the next file sharing thing? It doesn't make any sense. It works very well with fiat currency, right? It works very well with fiat currency, and a couple that have followed with their initial coin offerings. But beyond that, no point. Third, anarchy, right? Anarchy. Stay away from ICOs that focus on anarchy. It has to be a business, right? And there is this sect of the cryptocurrency world that wants to sort of dismiss Ripple, sort of throw shade in their direction. But the reality is Ripple is actually attempting to make blockchain a viable medium. And to a great extent, which is probably the bigger problem with Ripple, is that their token is really just a science project, right? It's really just it's the car inside the dealership, right? The nice, expensive, shiny one. It's their show pony. It's not really usable in any real means. It's just a means with which to show how their blockchain technology works and how it could work on a large scale across economies. That's why you see South Korea and Japan testing it. So, when you have an ICO, make sure there's a business to it, right? I get it. I get all the coins that are supposed to be made for the marijuana industry or whatever, but the reality is what's the actual value behind it in an ICO, right? Is there actually a utility, a true utility, or is it just supposed to be some currency? We have enough of those, right? I mean, we have Dogecoin, we have Bitcoin, right? So if the ICO is literally predicated on just creating some sort of currency that doesn't inherently have any value as either a utility token or has no float as an actual cryptocurrency, what's the point? There's just absolutely no point. You're oversaturated, and then you're just throwing more on top of it. So it's completely worthless, and you're buying into nothing. And finally, and this is going to segue into one of my future videos on trends that ICO companies should adopt, but it's the lack of financial transparency, right? And for all like the things that have blown up, right? The Mt. Gox, empty Gox as they call it now, right? When that company went into bankruptcy, the financial analysis was that the company was insolvent for literally 90% of its existence, right? And you see a great deal of these ICOs and just crypto related companies going bust, and everybody's surprised. Well, there's no financial transparency, right? And that's in part because there really isn't like a regulation for it. And for the securities that trade, the exchanges don't put any sort of financial reporting requirement like you do like on OTC markets in the securities world. So there's just like a lack of financial transparency. Like, I don't know what these guys are doing with the money. I don't know like what the true development costs, like on a quarterly basis. Are you making any money? What happened to the money? How much did the promoters take? And I'm not saying the promoters shouldn't take it. You should be paid for your idea, but it should be disclosed, right? And up front, I understand the startup, the financial disclosure doesn't mean a great deal, but if you have something and you're going to say, I'm going to go raise 5, 10, 25, 35 million on it, there should be some inclusion of like financial statements, some degree or some indicia of something that an educated person could look at and go, okay, this balance sheet makes sense. And there's no financial transparency in literally any of these ICOs, with the exception of sort of the ones that are securities offerings, because the law requires them to have it. So for like the utility tokens, the used tokens, there's just such a lack of transparency, and I think it needs to change. But I'll address that in a later video on how I think ICOs should change going forward. But these are the last 5 of the things they can kick to the curb. So check me out. I'm Adam Tracy, bitcoin-lawyer.org. Talk to you.